Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, Tone out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to talk about Lugia VSTAR. You see, ladies and gentlemen, Lugia VSTAR is a good deck. We know this, because I know Lugia VSTAR is coming in Silver Tempest, which just came out this Friday. I'm fully aware of this. But I'm also aware of the fact that it was released in Japan in Paradigm Trigger, which came out a few weeks ago, so there really isn't any question as to whether it is or is not a good deck. We've got data from Japan, we've got information from Japan. We know for, at this stage, an inarguable fact that at least at this moment in time, and we all know things can change, and sometimes in the Pokémon TCG things can change very quickly, but at least at this moment in time, Lugia is a good deck. But I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I mean when I say it's a good deck. Because I don't actually mean it's a good deck. I'm not like, this is a decent deck, you should give it a play. I mean it's a tier 1 deck in a world where other tier 1 decks don't really exist, because it is that much better than any other tier 1 deck. It is absolutely redonkulous how much better it is than other relevant decks. It's just completely owning the format right now. Like, proper job completely owning the format. Now, shout out to lovely Antoine Boulet, one of our very favourite people in the Pokemon TCG, who has shared this information from Shirashi_Poke over on Twitter. And what we've got is, look at the graph. Look at the pie chart. We can see that the number one piece of pie is Lugia VSTAR, which was 37% of the meta share. Now, these are the 300 decks that top cut City Leagues in Japan last week. City Leagues are Japan's kind of ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill tournaments. You've got the Champions League, which are the really big ones, and City Leagues, which are your smaller ones, but they're still decent size and very competitive. And of the 300 decks that top cut City Leagues in Japan last week, 37% were Lugia. To put it into context, we've got the 4 biggest decks of the tournaments that are represented in their own pieces of pie, and then all the other decks are lumped together, and the other decks outside of the top 4 did not make up as large a share as Lugia did at number 1. If we add up the 3 next biggest decks, that being Regigigas, your Lost Zone Toolbox, and Mew, we end up with 30.9%, 10.7 and 12.3 should bring us to exactly 23, and the 7.9 brings us to 30.9. That is 6.1% lower than Lugia on its own. Well, okay, I hear you guys cry. Fine, okay, I get it. But come on. That's just the decks that top cut City Leagues. It's not all about making top cut. Where you finish within the top cut is also very relevant. And yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. But the good news is we have a second graph to show off for that. And would you believe it, ladies and gentlemen, we've basically got winners, finalists, top 4, and top 8, going left to right. So the key on the bottom, basically the first colour is winner, the second colour is finalists, the third colour is top 4 or best 4, which I love saying best 4 rather than top 4, that's adorable, and then the final colour is best 8 or top 8. Okay? And we can see that in every category, it's not even close. Lugia won 16 of the City Leagues. What was the next winningest deck? It was actually Lost Zone Box with 7. Lugia had 16 finals appearances. What was the next biggest? That was actually Kyurem decks, which came in with 5. If we combine the winners and the finals, you get 32 for Lugia. What was the next highest? That was actually Lost Zone Box again, which came in at number 10. You'll notice at the top end, Lost Zone Box actually ends up higher than Mew, but Mew had more top 4s and more top 8s, which just about popped it ahead. But you could argue that Lost Zone Box deserves to be number 2 if we're just ranking the top decks, because it did have more wins overall. Although it did have one fewer finals, but then it had more combined 1 and 2, so I'll let you make that decision yourself. My point I'm making here is, we're not talking about a deck which is cleaning up in top 8 and then getting taken out, which we've seen with decks in the past. We are talking about a deck which is cleaning up in terms of making top 8, cleaning up in terms of making top 4. It has 20 top 4 appearances. The next highest was Mew with 12. It's got by far the most finals appearances and by far the most wins, more than double the amount of wins of Lost Zone Box. It is in every way number 1. It is absolutely ridiculous. If you want to look at, how many decks it takes to count the number of wins, it had 16 wins. Mew had 5. Well, you add the 7 from Lost Zone Box and you end up at 12, still not there. Add the 2 from Regigigas and you end up with 14, still not there. Add the 1 that Kyurem got, still not there. You have to add up Mew and Lost Zone Box and Regigigas and Kyurem and Giratina to get to the point where you've got as many wins as Lugia decks saw wins. That is absolutely redonkulous, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely redonkulous. So when I say Lugia is the top deck, the best deck, etc., I am not saying, oh no, it's pretty good. I'm not saying, hey, it's better than anybody else. I am saying it is so far above that we can legitimately call it dominant. But then again, when Astral Radiance came out, we could have said a similar thing about Palkia. It was very interesting. There was a regional in Melbourne when Palkia dropped, and the top 8 decks were Palkia decks. This is a weird thing that happens. Sets often tend to come up right before Australian regionals, and we have regionals where the new deck really does just crush. We saw a similar thing with Brilliant Stars and Arceus, and we saw a similar thing with Fusion Strike and Mew, although in neither case was it quite as big as we see here. Was Palkia the best deck by a million miles? With no question? No. It was good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like the only show in town. 1 week after Melbourne Regionals, we had Milwaukee Regionals over in the US, and sure, we had a couple of top 8 finishes for Palkia, but it didn't even make the final, and it was not the dominant deck it was over in Australia. These things can happen, especially when people are excited about a new deck. I'm not saying by any stretch that this is going to happen again. I'm not saying that Lugia is never going to be dethroned, but I'm also not saying that it's going to keep being this good forever. But I think something that must be borne in mind here is the fact that we're not talking about one tournament here. We are talking about a collection of results, and a lot of the time that actually leads to far better knowledge and far better information, because it's not just one local metagame where everybody's kind of gone in the same direction. So basically, to put it very simply, yeah, Lugia is legit and Lugia is for real, but Lugia is for real now. At this moment in time, Lugia is the best deck, and there really isn't much of a counter-argument here. But that does not necessarily mean it's going to last. Now, if anybody needs a quick rundown of the deck, just because I know we haven't actually talked about what the deck does yet, basically, we got Lugia VSTAR, who's got the ability Summoning Star, that lets you grab 2 colorless Pokemon without rule boxes from your discard pile onto your bench. It's really rather ridiculous. Now, the one we generally go for here is Archeops, which will get you 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon. So with 2 Archeops out from Lugia, that potentially gives you 4 special energy per turn. And that could be V-Guard energy, that lets you take 30 less damage from your opponent's Pokemon V, although bear in mind that does not stack, so no matter how many V-Guard energy you've got, it only reduces it by 30. But it could also be stuff like powerful colorless energy, which means you do extra damage, so your attack for 220 doesn't actually need to do 220, it could do a whole bunch more. And let's not forget that because you are a colourless Pokemon, you also have access to Dunsparce, which will remove your weakness. Obviously, one of the best ways to counter Lugia is to bring in a powerful lightning-type Pokemon, hit it for weakness, job's a good un. Unfortunately, you can't do that if your opponent's got a Dunsparce out, and that's a little bit of a problem. And one of the things Lugia does so well is kind of put you in an impossible position. You want to take out the Archeops to take away their engine, but then you're leaving Lugia unchecked. So you want to take out Lugia, but then Archeops can just build up another Lugia pretty quickly. And then you kind of want to take out Dunsparce if you're trying to hit for weakness, but maybe your opponent recovers Dunsparce, and even if they don't, you're leaving both their Lugia and their Archeops unchecked, and I'm assuming at this point you see where we're going. Sure, there's going to be times you don't get the combo off, and Lugia needs the V-Star power, let's be clear. Without the V-Star power, this deck ain't going to roll. And then in theory, there's ways to stop that. I mean, Path to the Peak, one would imagine will turn this off. I mean, it does, but you've actually got to go and get the Path to the Peak. And, you know, without Dunsparce, you can hit it for weakness. There's ways around it, but actually, when it comes down to it, there are counters here. I'm not saying there aren't counters, but I absolutely am telling you that right now, as we're talking about this, counters ain't working, ladies and gentlemen. The counters are not working. So there we go. Lugia's a number one deck, and to be perfectly honest with you, it's not even really close. Like, it's properly not even close, ladies and gentlemen. Hey-ho. For now, I want to know what you think about Lugia. I want to know if you think it is that gosh darn good. I want to know anything you want to tell me. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWasi. That's where we talk Pokemon and card games and Pokemon card games, all kinds of fun things. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel. You can get some bonus podcasts where I answer all of your questions. You can join a Discord where we chat about various things like Pokemon, but also honestly like anything you want to chat about. I'm a friendly dude. I like chatting. We can chat about anything you want to chat about. And I do give shout outs on the channel, like to the lovely Trial Captain Ad, which I believe this is their very first shout out on the channel. So welcome, Trial Captain Ad. Thank you for the support, and thank you for being a very lovely person. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.